So today I have some very important advice for people in their 20s. Now, technically, it can be applicable to other people too, like older ones and even younger ones, but it's especially important for people in 20s. Because 20s is a stage where you are figuring your life out, you have some major decisions ahead of you, like what will you do, who will you marry, what kind of a life will you design for yourself, essentially how will you go into adulthood. And this process can be very confusing because you have a lot of variables, right? You have your parents' expectations, कि ये सही है, ये करना, ये नहीं करना. You have your friends who are doing different things with their lives, so you compare yourself to them. Then you have your role models who you listen to on YouTube all day. And then of course you have your own personal dreams and aspirations. So all of it can get really confusing, like what will you do? And also there is an element in you which does not want to do much at all because we also are lazy. So what to do, what not to do, all of it can be super confusing. So in such scenarios, it's really good to have some fundamental principles. Like those principles act as anchor points, like guidelines on which you can walk on. It doesn't mean that if you follow a particular principle, you're gonna have a perfect life. But if you follow a good principle well, you cannot go too wrong with that. So today I'm gonna discuss one such principle. This one is super important for people in their 20s and even late teens. And the principle is just two words: become self-sufficient. Technically three, but yeah, become self-sufficient. By self-sufficiency, I mean becoming independent, becoming self-reliant. A simple definition of self-sufficiency can be, can you pay for your own survival? Like if your parents or your partner or just any benefactor that you may have in your life, if they just walked away, would you be able to survive? Would you be able to afford food, shelter, clothing? So who is not self-sufficient? We can say a 2 or 3 year old child is not self-sufficient because if parents and if nobody really helps that child, the child simply cannot survive on its own. So in that sense, I can also define self-sufficiency as, can you survive without too much one-sided help from others? Or can you survive without being an extreme taker? So when you're in your 20s, your prime goal should be self-sufficiency. Of course, you're welcome to have higher goals than that, but at least that must be part of the picture. You know, it's great to have big dreams and ambitions, but let's talk about the basics first. Your first important milestone is, can you pay for yourself? I mean, when I say it, it sounds obvious, right? But you'd be surprised that there is a significant percentage of people who just never become self-sufficient, men or women. It can be a really serious problem. And why don't people become self-sufficient? Well, there can be many reasons. First, it could be entitlement from parents. And in that part, I would say parents are also partly to blame. Many parents, especially in Indian context, they never really clarify like what's mine, what's yours. So children, when they grow up thinking, oh, all of this house, this wealth, these privileges, like all of this is also mine. And since parents have been fulfilling their demands for years and years, they feel like, of course, that's supposed to continue to happen. They're like, keep it coming. And the moment the parents talk about, okay, now we're done, like now we can't keep paying for you anymore, then they're offended. Then they're like, how dare you? So well into their 20s, they still have this entitlement from parents that you are supposed to take care of me, you are supposed to pay for my privileges, you are supposed to continue to parent me. And this entitlement is a major obstacle in self-sufficiency. Another obstacle is excuses or blaming other people. So many times you try new things, but then they don't pan out. So instead of actually thinking, introspecting, what might have I done wrong? Like, what could I do differently? You start looking outwards. Whose fault is it? And again, the prime target is parents. Like, it's because of you I couldn't do this, it's because of you I couldn't do that. I'm not saying that parents are not to blame. Of course, parents also make stupid mistakes by sometimes stopping their children from doing what they want or actually investing in the right things like their knowledge and skills. Parents often push their own desires onto the children. They make a lot of mistakes, no doubt, but that part is done, right? You cannot change your parents. So there is no point in you continuing to blame them because that game will never end. It was your destiny. You got some privileges and some bad things from your parents. Now it's time to move on. You can't keep blaming your parents or anybody else, like your teachers, your university, your friends, or your circumstances, your city, your government. If you go down the blaming path, you're never coming out of it. So stop that immediately and focus on what can I do to become self-sufficient as soon as possible. Another common obstacle is your inability to downgrade your lifestyle. So parents may have given you like an amazing, smooth, comfortable lifestyle. And now being on your own, you may have to start 2, 3, 4 levels below what you experienced in your childhood or just so far. And that is very, very difficult. This is why many people would not just take the leap, not take the jump from their house to just wilderness, like because how will we survive? So I think I read this experiment in this book from Tim Ferriss. 4-hour work week, where there was this guy, I don't know if it was Tim Ferriss or he was quoting somebody. Anyway, there was this guy who used to live in just very, very minimal conditions, eat very little food, and live in very poor conditions where there are simply no privileges. And once you live like that for months, you realize I can actually survive without all these privileges. I can downgrade my lifestyle and still have a good enough life. So be prepared to downgrade your lifestyle, because if you don't, you won't become self-sufficient. Another obstacle is endless perfectionism and waiting for the right circumstances. Such people would just keep postponing doing something productive. I'll do this next year. I'll do this after I've finished this and this. I'll start working after my sister's marriage. I'll start the next project after summer break. I'll get the job after I've reduced some weight. Or just perfectionism, which is unless I can make the best video, I won't even put out a single video. I would either go to the best college or I won't go to any. You can keep waiting for the perfect time. It will never come. Another reason some people don't become self-sufficient is they don't put in the minimum necessary effort in something to flourish. And that minimum necessary time is usually 2 to 3 years. You just have to spend 2-3 years doing the same thing over and over and over before you can get paid for it. That's the average time. Of course, it can be less and more than that. So if you keep switching, if you keep giving up, you will not become self-sufficient. Another reason could be addictions. Now, these days, there are multiple addictions that you may have. Addictions are simply the pleasures that you are so hooked on that you're not motivated to do anything else. One of the very common addictions is gaming addiction. So if you're in your 20s and you're just playing 10 to 12 hours a day, and that's not your career, you're not into esports. And by the way, even esports is a very risky area. Risky in the sense the probability of you actually becoming pro is super duper low. So if you're just doing it for fun, 10 to 12 hours a day, how would you have any motivation to do anything else in life? And that's pretty common. And this addiction could be something else also. You could just be watching movies and TV shows all day. You could be addicted to watching Instagram reels. Whatever your addiction is, if you're addicted to something today, it can really stop you from doing anything productive. And you're just so used to your routine that you never really take out the time to do the difficult things, to the boring, meaningless things that actually are required for self-sufficiency. And one last obstacle that I want to mention is dreams that are too big, ambitions that are megalomaniacal. Now, nothing wrong in having big dreams. I have big dreams. But if you don't work in the present thinking, oh, why would I work at these meaningless, tedious tasks? Oh, I just want to do something amazing. Then again, you could be living in a delusional world. Like you are imagining yourself a superstar and you think, oh, all of these tedious tasks are below me. You're going to remain jobless. You will not be able to pay for yourself. So always be prepared to do things which are very, very difficult, boring, because every superstar also has to do those things. It's just that you don't see that in their highlights. And celebrities and superstars, they always do talk about it. They always say how much hard work does it take. But that piece of soundbite doesn't really register in you. Okay, oh yeah, they're talking about hard work, but yeah, look at their life. So your real focus is on all the rewards that they're enjoying. So by the way, if you relate with any of those obstacles that I just mentioned, please do something to change your trajectory. You really need to do something right now. What to do? So largely you can see your journey as input and output. As long as you're doing something which is involving some input or output, you're on the right track. Now, what do I mean by those? Input is basically you learning things, you upgrading your skills. You reading a book, you watching a YouTube video to learn something, or you joining a class, you learning from some mentor. It could be anything. So that's the input. And the output is you executing. You going out there, working, writing stuff, publishing stuff, showing up in somebody's office, sitting behind a computer, entering data into some spreadsheet, making calls to customers, coming up with 10 designs a day. These are outputs. So if you want to become self-sufficient, you actually would need like a good balance of input and output. You shouldn't do any one thing for just too long in the absence of the other. Like if you just keep learning, if it's just constant input and you're not executing anything, then again, you're in a delusional world. Like in your mind, you know a lot, but when we ask you to do something, you're useless. So your knowledge is also improved and corrected and calibrated when you are doing something with it. You need reality checks, you need feedbacks from reality. And that's why we come to the output part. But even just output in the absence of input could also be problematic. Like you could be doing just the same thing over and over for years. That won't really lead to much growth. You can become completely stagnant. However, in the spirit of this video, I must be honest. In this case, output is more important than input because we're talking about survival. We're not talking about growth, happiness, success. We're talking about can you pay for your survival? And for that, if you have some output, you can survive. Even a daily wage worker, even a laborer, they have some output on everyday basis and they're able to survive. They're able to pay for their own survival and their kids' survival. So while input is important, output is absolutely essential. So please do something. Find an internship that can turn into a job. Find a low level, low paying job that can ultimately turn into a higher paying job. Now, why do I think self-sufficiency is so important? I mean, it seems like the obvious thing, but I want you to understand deeper reasons why this is so important, because what your brain needs is, your brain needs logic. Your brain needs detailed arguments behind a conclusion. So everybody knows that yes, being independent is good, but the arguments behind it are sometimes not strong enough to actually motivate you to do something. And that's why please focus on the reasons that I'm about to tell you. So first one is the obvious one. By becoming self-sufficient, you're taking your survival in your own hands. You are basically becoming the master of your own life. And that's actually a deeply important thing for you as an individual, to feel in control. If your life is out of your own control, if your survival is dependent on others, you will forever be anxious, you will forever be worried, and you will forever have to live on somebody else's terms. So you have to take your own survival in your own hands. And the closely related next point is that if you're self-sufficient, you obviously are more free. You can enjoy freedom. Now, wanting to feel free is one of our deeper instincts. And if that need is unfulfilled, your life's experience can be really sad. So you get true freedom when you can say, you know what, I don't really need anybody. I can survive on my own. Then you can call your own shots. And if you're not really valuing your freedom right now, you really should. And the closely related third point is you can avoid negative comments or negative treatments from others. Please remember that when somebody is paying for you, they have power over you, and power corrupts. It could be your parents. It could even be your partner. Anybody who you love more than your life, they can still treat you very, very badly if they have too much power. Parents can make their children feel really, really worthless. Like, what will you ever do in life? You are a complete mistake. Look at your sibling. Stop with your big talks. You will never do anything in your life. You go and tell them something. Okay, I'm about to do something. Yeah, I've heard that 10 times. You can do nothing. Parents say those things. And similar with partners also, which I'll get to in a moment. So basically, I'm talking about human nature. If you give somebody too much power over you, you're actually corrupting them. So if you really want to maintain good relationships with people around you, with your loved ones, you become self-sufficient. Like, your one bag should forever be packed and ready, that when others start treating you badly, you can just leave. So with self-sufficiency, you actually get, go to hell, I'm leaving money. And I repeat, here, please remember, like, whatever your parents are giving you, or your partner is giving you, or whoever, it's better to live 3 levels below without feeling like a burden. So you have to commit to yourself, I will live a life where nobody can act like they own me. And this brings me to the special section that I have created for women. I have some very specific advice for women in their 20s. So in our society, in our culture, in many households, in many areas, a woman's career is not that encouraged. And sometimes it's actively stopped. Like, I have seen those examples in my own life. Like, I've personally observed that phenomena. Like, before marrying, a girl would have to promise that they won't work independently. Like, they have to become a homemaker. Now, nothing really wrong in that, because I know it's coming from a tradition of division of labor. Like, I'm not making a moral judgment, but I am saying something here. Just because it has happened traditionally does not mean it is the best thing. And I'll tell you why it's not the best thing. The same logic. If you go into a household, if you have a partner or in-laws who are paying for you, you have given somebody else too much power. And this even specially applies to women who are going to enter into arranged marriages. You are giving too much power to somebody that you don't even know that well. If you do that, you're pretty much gambling with your life. Don't do it. There are women out there who are just unable to leave toxic marriages. Marriages where the husband cheats, where the husband or in-laws are violent, where they abuse the woman on a regular basis, where there is absolutely no love, just conflicts, complete domination. They're still unable to leave those marriages because they cannot pay for their own survival. And now in this case, also survival of their kids. They are stuck in bad marriages because the question is, how would I pay for myself or my kids? What will happen? They don't have go to hell, I'm leaving money. And this is why, even if you're entering an arranged marriage or a love marriage, whatever that is, please make sure that do not give your partner ownership over your survival. Study enough, work enough that in case you leave that house, you're able to pay for your food, shelter, clothing, and the food, shelter, clothing of your children. And I should also include education of children. Now, this education again doesn't have to be in the top private schools. Even if it's a public education, the life can still go on. So I'm mentioning this mostly for the extreme cases which do happen and can happen to you too. So don't enter a marriage without being self-sufficient. An overall benefit of self-sufficiency for everybody is it's just good for your self-respect, self-worth. What do you think about yourself? And that's really important for your happiness and well-being, that you feel good about yourself. And I want to briefly talk about some societal benefits too, where individuals are becoming self-sufficient. Now remember a definition that I said earlier. What is self-sufficiency? Can you pay for your survival without taking too much one-sided help from others, without being an extreme taker? So what that means is, for individuals in the society to become self-sufficient, they have to start giving something. They have to come up with some output. They can't just continue to be takers. You have to do something which will help others, for which you can get paid. Your existence has to add something for others. So which means if more and more individuals in a society are self-sufficient, it means there is more and more productivity. So overall, this ethic of self-sufficiency leads to a more productive society. And then another societal benefit is morality, like a moral society. Now, how are these two connected? Basically, if people are self-sufficient, they would put up with less immorality. Because they are stronger, they can push back, they can fight back. When things become extreme, they can walk away from some toxic individual. So self-sufficient society is actually ultimately a more moral society. And if you know that somebody can just walk away from you and you still want that person in your life, you have to behave better. So whether it's your parents, if your parents know that if I don't talk to my child properly, the child can just completely walk away, like cut off all connections. Like even a husband, when they know that, oh, if I cross a line, that she can just leave me forever because she can, then that husband also has to be more moral. So ultimately, self-sufficiency leads to healthier boundaries between people. So the reality is, many of us will never really think about self-sufficiency that much, because for many of us, it's just very easy to achieve. Like you just join your family business, or you just got a really good education and you just get a job right after and you become self-sufficient like immediately. But then the world is big, there is diversity. There are people out there who are well into their 30s or 40s who cannot run their own lives, who still live on other people's terms. They cannot even provide for themselves or their children. And the kind of stress and frustration that they have to face is something else. The kind of comments, pressure, or domination that they get from others is something that people who are self-sufficient would never understand. With time, those people also lose confidence in themselves. So if you're in your 20s, one of your highest priorities should be to not end up like that. So make self-sufficiency one of your highest priorities. Keep a good balance of input and output. Learn something, do something. If in next 10 years you can just pay for your own survival, you've already done something amazing with your life. Don't underestimate how important self-sufficiency is. Like what an amazing milestone it is. You really should be happy with yourself. And later on, if you can provide for your own children, then I would say you have pretty much lived your life fully in terms of your biology. Like you've fulfilled your biological dictates. And that right there is a noble life. Make sure to give yourself a pat on the back for it. I know it doesn't seem that big of a deal to you, but go ask people who are not self-sufficient. I hope this helps. If you want to listen to more principles related to work, productivity, and success, you can watch this playlist. Link is also in the description. Shridhar Life School is a team of psychologists who specialize in counseling. If you're going through very difficult times or you want to achieve higher well-being, we offer one-on-one counseling for individuals, couples, parents, and their children. To book sessions, go to our website shridharlifeschool.com.